Oh shit!
Just keep you on your toes. Hello,
All the
uh,
time.
people of the internet. This is your DM with Performance Check. We're going to talk some shit about what's been happening in the community. And when we say the community, we refer to the Absolute Tabletop official group on Facebook. We are both a part of that, and we do a lot of live streams directly in that group. And not all, well, most of mine don't make it onto YouTube. So if you watch my channel and you're not a part of that community, join it. It's really good.
It is.
Yep.
It is pretty rad. Yeah, I second this. Absolutely, 100%. Go over, check it out. It is actually 2 years today since they started their company, so that's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah. So what are we talking about? First of all, talking about your live streams, you were talking about drugs earlier, man.
It was talking about drugs. Whoa.
Drugs, man.
Yeah. Megan from Dice on Ice put up a post about do you have drugs in your setting? Do you have mechanics for them or whatever? And I just kind of thought that was interesting because they have been like a major focus of humanity for most of human history. And you kind of don't see a lot of it in high fantasy, I don't think. It's a big element of cyberpunk, like Shadowrun has a huge thing for drugs, and even Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games has like a big section on drugs and stuff like that, and like stimulants and combat drugs and stuff, but also just like recreational drugs. And I just thought that it was interesting that I can't think of any in Faerun, but I'm not an expert, but yeah, where are they? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I like to consider about it is they're obviously like a huge part of trade, like made there. So if you're looking for a way for adventurers to stumble across these in adventures, then I think obviously criminal syndicates leaps to mind, but I guess not all not all drugs are illegal. But
I mean, alcohol and tobacco, right, are the two biggest in the world, and they're both legal.
Absolutely, and have been used in insidious attempts to make other cultures addicted to them, so they then want them, and then forces them to like continue trade, which is an insidious usage of tobacco and alcohol in the past.
Yep.
I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I've only got one drug that I can think of at the top of my head in my setting. I can't remember if I told you about it before, Lloyd, but I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But in the Nine Kingdoms, and this actually comes from an older setting of mine as well, called Main Realm, there is a route called Visionary's Route. And it got its name because it used to be used by prophets and religious types because they believed if they would chew on it, they would get a glimpse into the divine or into the future. Now, in the more modern day setting, I say modern day, but the more recent times, that is usually looked upon as a foolish thing to consider, and it's just a way to like get your rocks off, like get high and fall into a stupor where you see all sorts of crazy shit. But I like to think that every now and then, maybe, just maybe, if the players were to take it, there would be, and the mechanic was I rolled a D100 on a certain percentage, if they, whilst chewing Visionary's Route, they would actually glimpse the future or something useful that was going to happen. So it became a kind of storytelling kind of device as well, and one of my players got hooked on it and started losing his shit. But that's the only thing that I can think of.
In this class, the only thing that I thought of was mushroom tea, which is just like a real thing that people did and still do. Like berserkers would drink mushroom tea before they went to fight, which just sounds like the most horrible experience I can think of. But I guess, and I was talking about this in the stream earlier, like I guess that if you are tripping and your headspace is on murder, then it's probably like maybe helpful. You know, I don't know if it would be or not, but maybe it is. They certainly like would drink mushroom tea, and they would like put all these different roots and stuff in it, and seemingly it like inured them to pain and made them, you know, insane with rage. But yeah, I was talking as well about like most drugs that we think of have to be synthesized somehow, you know, like I guess the only ones that you can just find lying around are mushrooms. And I guess cannabis, you know, I guess, but even that needs to be grown and like cultivated, while mushrooms just grow wherever. So there has to be like an industry around it to some extent, particularly if you're talking about like things like combat drugs or more refined stuff, you know, like things, I don't know, LSD and like heroin and stuff like that. If you're thinking about that, it has to be refined and made somewhere. It's not impossible for that in a fantasy setting because you've got wizards and wizards can do whatever, you know, whatever they feel like. So I think it's possible certainly to have them in your setting. And I think like if your setting has, you know, alcohol and brothels, then it makes sense to me that they would have drugs, you know, it's the natural sort of step.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Mike Lasham's actually come up with like a really decent point as well. Our good friend Mike Lasham, and he says that then you have things like prohibition and black market sales and the crime that goes along with the distribution of narcotics. So not only is like one particular, a number of different drugs sort of creating things within the culture of the world that you're playing in, it's giving you mission ideas, it's giving you quest ideas. Okay, so it's prohibition and there is a particular city that has banned these substances, but the brave and daring adventurers that might want to make a buck or two could try and smuggle it into the city somehow. You got yourself a mission. You got yourself a quest. The sound of actually trying to sneak magic mushrooms into a highly guarded military settlement, perhaps that would be pretty cool.
Like there's a lot of stuff that you can do even with like smuggling missions. It's a big thing in Edge of the Empire for me anyway, is like picking up cargo that is very valuable that you have to hide and like bring it somewhere, you know, and that's a mission, just like picking something up and bringing it somewhere. But if that thing is illegal, then it's like so much more interesting, you know, like if you get stopped and somebody's like, we have to search the ship, you better hope you hid that stuff well, you know. I think it's there's so much that you can do with it. Like in 40K, which is a favorite setting of mine, has a long list of like combat drugs and like other drugs, and I think you see it more in sci-fi. As I was saying, you need to synthesize it and stuff like that, but I think it would be really rad to see it in fantasy settings. And it doesn't have to be like anything crazy, but like chewing on certain roots or, you know, picking up leaves and whatever, licking frogs, you know, whatever it is, you know.
Licking frogs,
Like humans want to get their rocks off somehow and they'll find a way, you know, we always have.
Yeah, and I think a great example of you bringing Star Wars into this is that Star Wars famously calls its all the drugs spice. So it can even be dealt with in a more, shall we say, family-friendly environment as well. Han Solo is an action figure that kids like buy and stuff, but he's a drug smuggler.
Yep.
he sells drugs to people and he cuts them around the galaxy. He makes a profit off it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
But what you said about the mushroom tea and things like that in Viking settings, obviously with this club, that interests me quite a lot, actually. I can imagine a trip, like you were saying, like obviously would have pretty massive effects on Berserker warriors. And I can imagine it would make them want to think, yeah, we want to go to Valhalla. We want to try it because we're off our tits. Like, I absolutely love that. And okay, Lloyd, how about this then? In terms of a role-playing scenario, we're in a game and we're 4 warriors, and one of the players has decided to take the substances. Now, how would you be okay with someone like role-playing tripping balls? Like, how far would you let them go with that, or would it?
Yeah, I think as long as it fits the setting, it's fine. Like if you're tripping and you're seeing pink elephants when you have no idea what an elephant is, that's just dumb. But you know. But like if you're seeing, you know, all these like bloom effects and, you know, tracers in lights, and then you're seeing the enemy as like giants and yourself and your friends as like Einherjar, and like gold all over the place, and you can like see Valkyries in the sky and the Rainbow Bridge. Like that's fine, that's great. I like that. I think it just depends on the player, right, and like how into the setting they are, and that's the case with like everything, I think.
Yeah.
I think that if you were to take something like that in Iskloft, you would have to make a con save and a wisdom save. If you pass both of those, then the effects are going to be positive across the board. If you fail one, you know, you're going to either like feel sick and weak, or you're going to like be afraid, or like have a bad trip, which is, you know, very debilitating.
It certainly is.
And yeah, so I think like it would be like that. So my thought today that I kind of thought briefly about mechanics, because that's what I do, is I thought like if like the Berserker class or the Barbarian class would have a feature that allows them to like re-roll their saves on those saves, you know, so if they fail them, they can re-roll them once, so they have a better chance of like the Mushroom Tea affecting them in a good way. I would have probably a table that I would make for different effects that you can get. You know, if you pass your wisdom save, you become immune to fear, or you you know, become immune to charm, or whatever, different things like that. And then if you pass your con save, you might like get damage resistance, or like something like that, or like increased strength for the thing. But at the end of it, you would get like 3 levels of exhaustion. You know, it would last for, geez, who knows, a million years, an epoch. In your estimations, were probably a couple of hours in reality. And after that, you would just be knackered, and you would need to like do at least a full night's rest if you wanted to do anything else. Something like that, I think, would be interesting.
I love
I think tangentially from your point, I think that as long as you're like role playing the trip as something setting appropriate, then it makes a lot of sense, and it's what you expect to see, right? So if you're a berserker, you're expecting to go to Valhalla, and so like you're kind of like shaping it with your mind. This all sounds very hippie, but you're kind of like in control of it to some extent, and you're making it. You're seeing the things you want to see, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I love the, already you've dealt with some of the mechanics of it, and I absolutely adore that. I think to further expand on the role-playing thing, I mean, obviously there are applications for those drugs to be used in combat, like you've been saying. What about in terms of, because you say they would drink that before they would go into battle. And forgive me because I don't know an awful lot about the Viking culture, only the bits of the mythology. Were there any cases where drugs were taken maybe to witness the gods or something like that? Yeah, there was?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of religious ceremonies and stuff would involve people getting rickety wrecked. Or like seers and stuff, you know, Volvas and...
yeah.
What's the dude called? Gothi and stuff. They would like drink a lot of mushroom tea, and they would like see the future with it, or like commune with the gods with it, you know. And that's like definitely not unique to Viking culture. Like Romans would do it, and there's talk about like the Oracle at Delphi having like a volcanic crack. And so like the gases, whatever, they would like inhale those, and then the Oracle would like say a bunch of weird shit. So yeah, it would definitely be used for like divining or trying to speak to the gods and things like that.
That's really cool, and that's sort of what I was imagining. If I had to present a scene in Iskloft, like I would imagine it being in kind of like, I don't know, a medicine person's tent on the outskirts of a village or something. Them taking that stuff to get closer to the gods, get a message. Or an insight of what's to come in the future. I don't know. I'm just trying to make this about my visionary route thing again.
No, but I like that as a drug, because like so much of drugs is about expanding your consciousness, I guess, and like seeing things you wouldn't usually, and like thinking in a way you don't usually. So I like that there's like materials and things in the world that you can use to like, you know, and maybe it's, you know, it probably isn't actually magical, and you're probably not speaking to the gods, but it's enough that you think you are, you know.
Yeah.
I've certainly gained wisdom, like in that way that I know it's entirely chemical, but like I still feel the effects. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And this is something that to expand on this, because obviously, if we're dealing with fantasy worlds, not so much in Iscloth, but well, there are some magic users in Iscloth, I suppose. I would be interested to see what would happen if if a standard D&D wizard or cleric or something like that took the drug, because you can already see weird stuff when you have magical abilities in D&D anyway. So what would it do to you if you were on drugs and you could see into different dimensions and stuff and know for a fact that they're real anyway? Like, what would that do to you?
Be insane.
That would be absolutely nuts.
I guess if you like know there's different dimensions and you like take a certain drug and then you can like see them as if you're there, it would be like super valuable.
Yeah.
God, yeah. Very scary, wouldn't it?
If you had a bad trip and you're looking into the ninth circle of hell and you actually are seeing it. Oh my God.
Stare into the abyss, literally. Oh God.
Holy Christ. So Taylor, our wonderful friend Taylor, oh wow, we have lots of comments now. That's come out of nowhere.
Exploded. Hi friends.
So Taylor came up with a wonderful comment, and she says, what if magic in a setting was like a drug, magic itself? So potions and spells that are sold on the black market, and only the elite can afford cures and healing. Now, in your stream earlier, Lloyd, you mentioned a very good point about people getting addicted to potions. You're having those so much that you're getting addicted, and I love that idea. Now, what if that extends to spells? What if that extends to the point where you are addicted to the connection you have with the arcane or the divine?
I think that's like so interesting and so possible. It seems so likely to me as well that if you're able to like literally summon whatever it is, the power of the ether, and harness it yourself, that's probably a very addicting feeling.
Yes.
Like you can summon fire. Just fuck off. Like what? I would never, if I could summon fire, I would never stop. Like, I would never. I would just like all day long. Like, look what I can do. How cool is this? I could, and like, let's say that's one minor thing that a wizard can do. Never mind. I mean, we're kind of getting into this again, but like, never mind stopping time or like teleporting or whatever. Like you can infuse your body with magic. You would become so crushingly addicted to that, I think. And then imagine like you become so used to that feeling of magic in you, and if you like went into an anti-magic zone, I think you would probably like immediately vomit, or suffer withdrawal symptoms so terribly if you like suddenly couldn't use your magic. Because I imagine it feels like, to me, it's always kind of been like a weave or like a like water or something running through your body, and it's always like when you're a wizard, like a torrent that you can barely contain, but then it just stops and dries up, and you're like, what the fuck am I even? Like my whole existence is based on magic. If it's gone, what am I? That's like super interesting. Addicted to magic. There's a big thing in like 40K about like magic is so powerful and people don't control it. They just harness it. They just like point it in a direction, kind of, Like most of the people who can like communicate over like interstellar distances go blind because they like just destroy their bodies in the process, and they only live for like 20 years because trying to harness that much power just like melts you, and I like that as an idea too, that wizards don't get old, that they just like, well, maybe it's more sorcerers because they're like, they have the magic within them, but either way, just like when your body is like used for that amount of power all the time, like it's not meant to, it's not meant to do that. It's not built for that. It should like erode you, I think.
I once played a sorcerer, and he, like you say, his entire existence was being able to use magic, and there were a few times when he stumbled into an anti-magic field or lost that ability. I don't think I played it like he was an addict going cold turkey, but the very fact that their existence, particularly sorcerers, actually depend on the fact that they have just the magic flowing through them. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to think of, and now I really like the idea. In fact, I am going to nick that at some point, and I don't know, maybe there'd be a contingent of magic users that they are basically just junkies that get off on using magic the whole time, and
let's put it in Star Metal.
let's put it in Star Metal. Yes, done.
Yeah. Addiction to magic.
Addiction to
There
magic.
you go.
Yeah, well, and that makes sense actually, because and for those of you listening, about Star Metal is a setting that me and Lloyd are coming up with. We'll go into more detail at another point, but the magic basically comes from an older tiefling society. At least that's what the general consensus is. So I like the idea of it being a seductive kind of insidious kind of power that takes something out of you whenever you're using it. So that's cool, man.
Oh man,
we'll have to open the...
Dark Sun, where like the power has to come from somewhere, right? And so it comes from life. So as you're casting spells, plants and stuff are dying around you. That's fucking rad. It has to come from somewhere. Where's it coming from? Things, people, which is really interesting. Just I have this image of like some like Stone Age man with like a gaunt face and like some scale armor or whatever, and he's just like chanting, and around him like a palm tree just like shrivels into nothing.
Oh man, we'll have to whack open the Google Doc.
Right, I'm gonna read some of these comments because we have a ton of people in the chat, and I want to say
yeah. So we got the Mike, I believe.
We've got Mike the Piper, the one, the only. Then you have things like prohibition and black market sales and the crime that goes along with distribution of narcotics.
We've done that one.
Yeah, we've talked about that, haven't we? Yeah.
No, I already read it, but it's fine.
You read that already?
Yeah, there are Red Taylors. Then it's back to Mike again.
His mom's the Nerd Taylor.
That's Taylor's new channel.
I never knew that. Hi, Taylor. Okay, actually, my setting of odds is prohibition on magic. Fuck yes. Good. Makes so much sense. Why would anyone not prohibit it? It's got the same. After a sorceress and an Ulfednar played by Locreus and Corinne tried to kill the king, who was a bad guy, like a villain, but failed. The word spread from there that magic was illegal and witches were cruel and evil, and that the Ulfednar, who had up till then always served men, were like horrible bastard monsters. And now, so because of that, like it's changed in a way that now that magic is like deeply terrifying for most people, and they will like rat out and report any magic users they see, because they assume that they're in league with the elves and the elves are bad guys. And you have witch hunters to ensure that there aren't non-sanctioned magical users, which is great as well. I really like that. This Baldur's Gate 2, it's set in Athkatla, and there's like the Cowled Wizards, and only they're allowed cast magic. Like arcane magic is under strict rules. You have to like have a license and stuff like that. I really like that as well. I mean, it just makes sense to me that you have to like control those people, or else they'll just kill everyone and dominate the world.
Yeah, it's like in a more simplified version, but it's like gun control. It's like recognizing that something is incredibly dangerous and putting laws in your society to ensure that people don't misuse that dangerous thing, because otherwise it's going to hurt a lot of people. And at first I thought, oh, aren't we a boring bunch of bastards for regulating it? But it makes sense. And I think in a way, when magic is regulated and not as... We talked about it before, but when magic is rarer, it's more magical. Yeah. It's better that way, I believe. So then Taylor continues and says, imagine if the elite kept magic for themselves, so it's terrifying and exorbitantly expensive for commoners, but the rich live long and easy lives, love long and easy lives. So yeah, a class boundary to reach into magic. I mean, you could say, well, you need to be from an upper class to access universities, for example, so only people are allowed to become wizards.
Just like real life.
Like. Just like real life. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Only rich people get to be doctors. And then there's a thing in Warhammer again, which is like the rich can kind of just live forever. They can get this like rejuvenation treatment where they like buy new organs and like new skin and stuff, and they just get to live forever, basically. If you're rich enough, you can live for hundreds of years, which is creepy and great.
It is creepy.
Check for Trap says, "Hey, who's Check for Traps?" That's Alan, right? Hello.
Alan,
And Mike says, "Hey, hello." Mike says, "Adding temporary hit points until you come down, then suffer 2 points of exhaustion, and next long rest only heals half." Yeah, is this for the mushroom tea? Something like that, I think, works.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that.
So Alan says, "So how would you treat drugs like potions in 5e, such as 1d4 hours and gain 3 resistance to physical damage, but take disadvantage on intelligence and wisdom build checks," as an example? Yeah, absolutely, exactly like that. I would probably make the effects more pronounced, even. So like a bigger good effect and a bigger bad effect.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say about what Mike is suggesting is barbarians are already like invincible. Like they only take half damage for like normal attacks and stuff, so giving them more HP, that's just madness. But I guess it's the thing that makes the most sense as well.
Well, in this, there's like a quote from like Havamal, I think, or one of the sagas where it's like the berserkers, and it's something like, "No fire nor iron could harm him, and he couldn't be stopped. The rage was like burnt so hot that he wouldn't stop for like the ocean, nor if you threw a beautiful woman in front of him." And it's just like this weird description of like how they cannot be stopped. And there's descriptions in like history of like these warriors having like a limb cut off and still fighting and stuff like that. So I like that idea that it's just it's become really unstoppable and inured to pain. So like you can, they have that mechanic for barbarians where they drop to 0, but they actually drop to 1. But you could do a thing where they, can't fall below 1 while they're under the duration of the drug or something. They just like will keep fighting even with things torn off. But then when it stops, all that damage hits them and they probably die. Something like that.
I love that. That basically makes them like a super weapon on the battlefield, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't stop until the thing wears off. That's amazing. I really like that. Then Alan from Check for Traps says, in that instance, for visions, you could look to divination spells such as clairvoyance, take the ritual route versus spell casting route. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And Terry says, "I think that makes perfect sense. Drugs can enhance your abilities, but at a cost and with a chance for addiction." Yeah. The addiction thing is so interesting to me. I think it's like fascinating. And like I said in the stream, I played a character called Crank, this long-running character in Shadowrun. He was an elf, and he was just like a gunslinger adept. So adept is somebody who like uses magic to like make their body more powerful. Yeah. And so he was already superhumanly quick. He was able to, and superhumanly accurate with his guns. He was able to shoot, the eyes off a gnat from 200 paces away. But he like loved that feeling that he was like so quick and so powerful and the best, gunslinger in the world. And so he like started to take this performance enhancing drug, Cram, which is like the cheap alternative. And he like it made him even quicker. And so combat would start and Crank would roll 40 something for initiative and everyone else would roll like a 12. So he would get 4 turns in the initiative order while everyone else got 2. Which is just fucking nuts. And he got addicted to that feeling that he was just like the best in the world, and so he would like take more Cram, the effects would get better, but he would like then start to like have come downs and he would become addicted to it. And so by the end he was like this total burnout, who was still really good at shooting guns, but like was like just like gaunt and like real gross and like talked like that all the time and like just like had no ability to be personable anymore. So he just became like a weapon. It was really, really cool.
I love that.
And then trying to kick that addiction was like so difficult for him, because you have to like obviously not take the drug, but also like there's like certain things that trigger it, like killing things, because that's what he did with it. And he's basically an assassin, so like it was really, really interesting as a journey. And I think the addiction thing is a really good thing for your character to have, like a really difficult challenge for your character to overcome.
Yeah, and not only does it inform the character mechanically, like he begins to suffer because he's not having the drug, he's not as good. Also, it brings wonderful role-playing sort of topics to come up. Addiction is a very serious topic in our real world, so I can imagine it being quite an interesting story to explore in a role-playing game with sensitivity. But I just love the idea. But, sorry, go ahead.
It'd be interesting to explore in different settings that have different sensibilities. Like,
yeah,
is anyone going to be like, "Oh, you should stop drinking in Isloft," or like, because they're not, or like in Star Wars, even. I wonder, is the same sort of like feeling and like understanding that it's a chemical addiction and stuff. Certainly in fantasy setting, it's not going to be an understanding that it's a chemical addiction. They're just going to be like, "Would you ever cop on and stop?" Which I think is interesting.
Amazing. Yeah, I think this is really great. I love Shadowrun is amazing for that kind of thing anyway. I just love the idea of a Shadowrun character getting in from after an adventure and going straight to the medicine cabinet. Them having to take things to keep themselves going.
Yep,
I love it. Great, fantastic. And Alan finally says, increase the DC each time they try and resist the addiction. Yeah, absolutely. And they need to have withdrawals when they can't get their fix. This should be a drawback like temporary ability scores and disadvantages, etc. Yeah, absolutely.
So Shadowrun has like a sliding scale of like how addicted you are. So it goes from like, casual user to like burnout. And so that dictates how much of the drug you have to take to stay on top. And also dictates that when you start to not take it, how bad your withdrawal symptoms are. And so if you're at the final stage of it, your withdrawal symptoms are crushing. You basically need to do like a heroin cold turkey thing where you lock yourself in a room and just like suffer for a couple of days or weeks even until you're free. So I think that's a good idea to keep in mind as well, depending on how addictive a substance is, that there's a sliding scale, because there are certain things you can be addicted to and it won't ruin your life, like cigarettes. But it's definitely interesting. I like the idea of withdrawals and like major disadvantages if you've been taking something a long time and then stop.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. Amazing. Now I think we should move on to the next topic, Lloyd. So do you want to talk about the thing we were talking about the other day, or do you want to just jump straight to villains? Because I know you wanted to talk about Deus Ex.
Yeah,
I don't really have much else.
Quickly, I think I wanted to mention that it's setting appropriate, I think, for this god machine, this like sudden savior. I think it depends on the setting, because my gut reaction when I see something like that is to be like, it's cheap or it's lazy. Because I believe heavily in consequences, right? That if the players get into a situation where they're fucked, then they should be fucked.
Agreed.
But it depends on the setting, I think, and certain and the tone of the game. So like in Middle Earth, it does not feel out of place to me at all. Because we watch Lord of the Rings, you read the books, you see The Hobbit. It's full of it, nonstop. Like I said previously, Gandalf is just that. That's his job, mostly. Look to my coming in 5 days or whatever, and then he conveniently arrives exactly at the right time when they're about to lose, and all that sort of stuff. Like, what did you call it? Eucatastrophe, right? The opposite to a catastrophe, where the day is saved at the darkest moment, sort of. And that's like, I hate that mostly, but it works in Middle Earth, right? And I think it works in Lore Keepers, and I don't know why I think that. But it didn't bother me in the game that you ran the other day at all. And I really thought it would have, because if you had told me that it was going to happen, I'd be like, oh, for fuck's sake, Rob, figure it out. But in the moment, it seemed really good. So I think part of it as well is how into it you are. And the setting for Lore Keepers is like the setting, the tone is very heroic, It's like very heroic. The Lore Keepers are like special, unique, super important. Like there's like a lot of plot around their order and like the power that they wield and stuff. And this, we'll get onto this in a second with villains as well. You know, the villains are like very cinematic. You know, you have villains that are very like I don't know, interesting, nuanced, and like, but also very like traditional. You know, like they do monologues and they like and stuff like that. And so I think in that kind of setting, in that kind of world, the saving makes sense.
Sure.
Because it's the kind of world where people do monologues, and the kind of world where like, you know, a man smashes around with a hammer, and like a giant spider fights a giant kraken. You know, it's like that kind of world where like it's like very high fantasy, heroic stuff like that.
Mm.
And so I think it doesn't feel. I'm kind of just rambling, but I'm trying to explain it.
I get what you mean, man. Like, this is something I said to you because bless Lloyd. Lloyd messaged me and said, "Rob, I'm going to do a stream about Deus Ex, but I don't want you to think that I'm having a go because of what happened in Lawkeepers. I won't go into it fully because it's not like a massive spoiler, but basically there are forces that arrive at some point in the latest session. Now, my only reason I did that was because there was something that had set up why the relief force would be there, and it wasn't something I'd done. It's something that one of the players had done. It's something what Locrius' character had done. He'd sent a letter to these people. Now, it was left vague, but generally speaking, it was the letter's content was, "Come and help us. We're the Lawkeepers. We need to fight Advent." Blah. Advent had come from a position where they were, and they followed, and that's why they were there. To me, I felt okay, because I'm with you, Lloyd. If I had nothing, if there was no explanation for it whatsoever, if just a random bunch of people just showed up when they had no reason to be there, going up against an enemy which is one of the most dangerous that has ever threatened the land, you know, for no reason whatsoever, then I would be on board with that. I would be the same as what you were saying. Like, what the fuck is that? Why are you doing this? It's cheap. It's saving the characters when they've got themselves into a mess.
Yeah.
But I felt okay because one of the characters had set it up, and a moment where you're not just having your ass handed to you the whole time. Because while the Lawkeepers is heroic, you have suffered a few defeats at the same time. So I don't know, but I'm glad. To me, it felt natural and it seemed to work.
The thing that irks me about it is not that someone has come to save you, but that the timing is so perfect. You know, like that's always the thing that I'm like, that's convenient. You know, like. You know, it happened in Game of Thrones at the Battle of the Bastards, right? Like all of a sudden, at the perfect necessary time, the knights appear, or you know, just as the trolls are about to kill the hobbits, Gandalf breaks the rock or whatever, you know. And it's like, it's just the timing sometimes that I feel is like. But I get it; it's like a dramatic device, you know, it's a storytelling device. But I just feel like that so rarely happens in real life, you know. I guess that's the thing. Not
I agree.
That the timing is so convenient, you know.
No, I'm with you. Like, I like the idea of even. This is what I would do, and I would, if I was going to run something in Iscloft, but then there's a similar situation to what happened in Lawkeepers, where there is a small force that have to defend a village, and they're going up against like an army of 1,000, and they're breaking in and they're like taking over, and the relief force doesn't arrive, and the battle ends with a crushing defeat, or the players having to run away, only then to discover that like 2 days later people showed up to help.
Yep, exactly.
But by then it's already over, and then that relief force isn't strong enough to repel the attackers without them already being locked in place by an existing force, so they get killed as well.
Yeah. Exactly. There's like a
if you pull.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, if you pull that maneuver in medieval or Viking combat, and the timing isn't correct, and you know, your forces show up late, then they're going to have to then fight that force on their own or also run away.
Yeah.
So it's a huge risk to do that in a real life kind of setting, I suppose.
It's one of the things they say about Julius Caesar, and he listened to that recently as well. I know the Celtic Holocaust that Dan Harlan that Caesar's like main genius as a general was like his decisiveness and the speed that he would move his army at, and like he would like make a decision and stick with it. He wouldn't like ever, you know, agonize over it. He would just do it, and so like that let him win a lot, and his enemies would not be as decisive or as quick, and like that is enough to lose a war, you know. And
yeah,
if your relief force is not led by Julius Caesar, which it probably isn't, you know, they're going to fuck up the timing, or they're going to get there at the wrong time, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was just my rant. I wanted to talk about it a little bit. I still can't explain it very clearly, but that's it.
I think Alan's made a very good point in the chat. He says you want the character choices to matter, to have weight. So if you swoop in and have NPCs save the day that the PCs never set up, then it feels hollow. That's right.
Yep.
At that stage, as the DM, you're saying, oh, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And it's literally not involving the players in any way whatsoever. And I think that is like a fundamental flaw if that's the way that you're running it, I think, because it's robbing the players of allowing them to do that themselves, or suffering for the consequences of not setting that kind of thing up. So, yeah. Taylor says, in real life, the cavalry are a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Mike the Piper asks us, where would you draw the line between Deus Ex Machina and straight-up metagaming? Interesting. Because, well, like I said, I mean, my main thing of this is really, if you've set it up, even if it's just a couple of lines, if you set it up, then it's okay if the tone and the mood is right, you're playing in the right game. I think the difference is, I think, well, metagaming is acting on knowledge that you understand beyond the game, beyond what your characters would know. Sorry, so I don't know how. What do you reckon?
Because to me, metagaming is a concept that exists for players and not for the GM.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how the GM metagame, because he knows everything. You know, the GM, he or she just knows all the things. That's their job. They know all the things that can happen or will happen. So I don't know how the GM can metagame, because to me, it's like using knowledge, like you say, that your character doesn't have. So if you want to explain that further, Mike, we'll definitely.
Oh, he says he meant railroading. He said railroading, yeah, and that's a big point as well. Taylor's also said sometimes you can feel the GM doing gymnastics to save the PCs, and I think that all falls into the same thing, really, doesn't it? That when you've got it begs the question: why did you put them in the situation if they're not contributing in a way that's going to affect the outcome?
Yeah, you need to let those dice fall where they fall. If the players get themselves in a situation and you're trying to help them, and you can tell them, like, you know, you can hint that maybe this isn't a good idea, or that, like, you know, it's dangerous or whatever. But if they go through with that plan and then you save them, then they basically have no agency anyway, because no matter what happens, you're going to make sure they don't die.
Case in point, I realized we actually, to bring up the Law Keepers again, I promise I won't do it too much more, but last session, Lloyd's character Marius decided to leap over the wall to stop a battering ram from breaking down the gate to buy them more time. It was a wonderful, heroic act, and it bought them a lot of time. However, on rewatching it, because I like to make notes rewatching it so I'm ready for the next time I come around to prepping, it's just what I do for the next session. Rewatching it, I realized I made a mistake in the initiative order, and Marius went before Azarax. Now, had Marius gone after Azarax, he would have died. It was only because Azarax acted after that that Marius was saved, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my god, I literally had no way of getting you out of there. And to be honest, mate, I wasn't going to.
Yep, I want to talk about that. It just struck me. We'll talk about it after this.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what we will do with that. Guys, I skipped over Alan's comment, and then we're going to move on to our next point. He says, if PC set up a series of events in previous sessions when the reinforcements arrive at that pivotal moment, it can be that climactic turn of the tide versus the GM trying to save the PCs. Absolutely, no, I completely agree. Spot on. I'm glad we had this conversation. So, sorry, Lloyd, you were saying?
So, in the last Lorekeepers game, I played Marius as Marius, and I don't generally like when people say I'm just playing my character to excuse bad behavior, but I don't think it was bad behavior. I think it was in character. Marius is like a warrior, a zealot, and he hates Advent. He's a vengeance paladin, and his vengeance is against them. He hates them, and he will not tolerate one step backwards in the face of their advance. And I was like, I want to keep playing Marius, like really, really strongly want to keep playing him. He's a great character. I love playing as him, but I also didn't want him to just like be a wuss and a coward and like not get involved, because he would. You know, that's like a big part of his character is like his valor and his heroism.
Sure.
And so I like made lots of decisions in that battle that could have gotten me killed. But I did that with the knowledge that I could be killed and that I should be killed for these like silly things that he was doing, you know? And I think that's something to consider, that if you're going to be a heroic character, you have to like accept the consequences of your heroism. You cannot expect to like be heroic without danger, and you can't expect to like be a hero without punishment or like danger, you know? And so I was like fully accepting of the fact that I might die, that this character that I've played for like 10 sessions, you know, might just be snuffed out, and that I have to make a new character, and all the bonds that I had made and stuff would vanish. I was like willing to deal with that because it made sense for the character. So I think that's something you have to consider. If you want to play somebody who like likes to get in the thick of it and like maybe puts their life in danger, you have to be willing to die. Otherwise, don't play that character.
And it was a weird thing that happened that night, because it was an unspoken thing, but as the GM, I fully understood that each and every one of you were putting your feet firmly, you know, saying, this is happening, we're going to do everything we can to save these people. And it was like you were not daring me, but saying, we don't care, bring it on. And I was like, it was a test. We talked about this as soon as the stream ended. It was a big test to see if I would go for it and try and kill you. Which, as you say, there is no point in any of this happening if there isn't risk and danger and stakes and tension. And I'm pleased to say I did my best to try and kill you. I failed, but I did my best, and for that, I think it turned out to be a better session than what it would have been if I hadn't. So
for me, certainly, like I need that threat of death for me to think the combat is worth anything or interesting. You know, I need to know that my character can and will die, or else what's the point in even having the combat at all? Why don't I just say, oh, we fight for 20 minutes and then I win, you know? Because if there's not... It's the same thing, right? Like if you're not willing to kill my character, like then what's the point in having the combat at all? You might as well just like narrate it, or just like not have it be there. It's the same thing, you know. If there's no actual risk of you losing, and so I felt that there was a risk of me losing, but I was willing to lose. So you need to be willing to lose if you want to play someone heroic, I guess.
Pretty profound, man.
Yeah. I guess.
I guess.
So Taylor says Caius and his characters all day, heroic with a death wish. Caius loves being killed. He will not stop. He's so determined to have a heroic death for many of his characters. It's great. There was a particular game where I ran it, and they like it was in Iscloft, and they like spent the night at this like house in the middle of nowhere, this like witch, and she like spoke a prophecy about Caius's character that the one-eyed man would kill him.
Ooh.
It was more kind of vague than that, but it was something like, you know, Grimnir, which is one of the names for Odin or whatever, would kill him. And so they like go, and like maybe an hour later in the game, they like meet Ogvai and some of his warriors, and one of them is a one-eyed spearman, and Odin uses a spear. And so Caius just like looks at this guy, and he's like, ugh. And his character was like super freaked out about it, and in the end they fought, and that spearman did kill him.
Yeah.
Now he killed him mechanically, like not through any like fudging on my part, but he did kill him, and he was just like, that was the best death I've ever had, which is great. It felt really satisfying. But Caius is like very keen to die. Yeah,
it's always good when someone turns around to you and is content with the way that their character goes, rather than salty or disappointed. And sometimes people can be disappointed because they just happen to get killed in a fight. Yeah, and it wasn't, and that happens. But I suppose it is very satisfying when you get that talk, like, I'm okay with that happening, you know. So no, it's really good stuff. And yeah, Caius wants to die quite a lot from what I've gathered of him playing different games. Absolutely. Great stuff. So shall we move on to our final topic, and I suppose the headlining topic, Lloyd?
Yes, let's.
So again, I suppose this stream actually stems from like the conversation we had yesterday, I think it was.
So I had talked about how Rob tends to, in Lore Keepers, has villains that are very colorful and memorable, and like I think have some villainous tropes. I don't use the word trope as a bad thing ever. I think it's like a really important thing. Stories to me are like cyclical, and there's only really a couple of stories anyway. And so you can like use the things that have happened in other stories to like reinforce things in your own. And yeah, you have these villains, and particularly this like herald that appeared. I'm just going to ruin this Lore Keeper session because there's a lot in it I want to talk about. So if you haven't watched it, you should. There was this herald, this like gaunt sort of man who like spoke with this particular voice that was just, you could just tell he was a bad guy, you know. And the way, and I think I said this to you as well, is because you're an actor, you're able to do that sort of thing, and you can like put different inflections and voices and stuff like that, and even like the tone and the rhythm of the way that you speak and stuff can really inform the way that a villain works. But one of the things that I thought was most interesting is that like in the Nine Kingdoms, villains can give monologues. Villains can like, you know, action can stop, and they can talk, and they can give a scary monologue, and they can. It's a different kind. It's like it's not the sort of hyper realism of the games that I try to run. I feel strongly that like if I had a villain and I put him in front of Nicholas Dawson and he started to talk, Nico would be like, "Yeah, I chop his fucking head off halfway through the speech," you know?
Yes.
Like he's distracted. He's distracted. They're going to stab him, you know? Like,
yeah. Definitely.
You know? So it's like a different sort of reality, you know?
Yeah.
And like Lore Keepers, as I say already, is kind of like more heroic and stuff, and so there is time for those villains to be villainous, you know?
Yeah, I get it, and thanks, man. I appreciate that. But I mean, you're right. I do rely on certain tried and tested tropes to for a number of my villains, really. And it's what I know. It's the kind of stories that I know, and I know I can tell well. I think one of the main factors, I think, for Lore Keeper villains in particular is, no, I'd say villains in general, actually. Like, I think if you're going for something that has to that you want to resonate with your players or the people that are listening to your story, whatever it extends beyond role playing games, I suppose, is a kind of confidence, I think. If you're if you're unsure about what your villain is doing there, or why they're doing what they're doing, then I think that can be a problem. I have the sort of like Equinox, for example. He wears he's just a walking cool thing in my mind. Like he has a cool mask and he has like a long flowing cloak and he can fire lasers out of his eyes.
Got a lightsaber.
Like, yeah, he has a kind of lightsaber kind of thing. Well, like a light fire sword, whatever.
Lightsaber.
Exactly, lightsaber. So yeah, like there is that. But those are things that I can fall back on because they are fantasy. They're staples of fantasy and they're staples of sci-fi, and they are at my disposal in Lore Keepers because that's the setting that I've made. Now, I think for you have a much more difficult job because of those things for Iskloft. Now, you have magic, but it's a very select type of magic that it only. Am I right in saying that magic is only used by certain people in Iskloft, if I'm correct?
And it's so shunned and so like hated that you'd never get an army to follow you if you were a sorcerer, you know?
Yeah.
Even the bad guys in Iskloft have the same beliefs most of the time as the heroes, you know?
Sure.
So like it's a monoculture. Everyone is Norse to some extent. They all worship the same gods or the Jotun, you know, but they're kind of two sides of a coin almost. And so you tend to have people who like believe strongly in like military valor, you know, that's important, as opposed to magic, which they like revile, you know.
Yeah, and I think and those things are very good, I think. I mean, I like the idea with Iskloft that I almost look at it as a challenge, Lloyd. Like the moment we had this conversation, I was thinking to myself, that's a really good point. Like what can you do? I like the idea of going the opposite way for a villain with this in Iskloft. Like if I was gonna run a villain, I don't know, I think I would make them I'd have one of the villains maybe like not be physically superior in any way. I mean, you've told me once about the was it Floki the Fat? Something
Yes.
the Fat?
Yep.
And he sounded amazing because he's like the antithesis of everything that makes like an honorable warrior,
Yes.
like you know, like he's everything that isn't. And I love that idea. I love the idea of a character like that having to learn their strengths it to their advantage, whether that be money, whether that be having a silver tongue, and I love that. And maybe I don't know, why don't we make an Iskloft villain, Lloyd?
Yeah, I only have one Iskloft villain, which is Ogvai, but he's like a giant, so like that's enough, you know.
Which is perfect.
It's perfect. He's like a half giant. He's like 15 feet tall, and he's like this eternal warrior who can't die until the world ends. Like that's his thing, or like will die but come back, you know. But it would be cool to make a baddie. Let's do that.
Okay, well, and this is something that this is going back to ages ago when I first started thinking of the idea of Lore Keepers, and I didn't even really know Lloyd very well. I didn't know any of the guys really that well at that point. But I was starting to draw up these ideas for the campaign, and I knew I wanted a villain that was going to be pretty intimidating, but also a staple kind of villain, like I can't think of the word now. Archetypal villain, you know. And I went about just choosing some ingredients. I picked a spell from the Player's Handbook, Disintegrate, a favorite of mine throughout a number of editions, and decided that was going to be his primary weapon. And I just wanted to pick a few, just a handful of things that would be definitively him. That's what he uses. That's his power, and stick to that. So for Iskloft, we should use that mentality, but look to all of the lore of Iskloft. I really like the elves in Iskloft. I don't know about you, man, but I love the idea of them. I think they're terrifying.
Yep, they're scary. But they tend to be like background antagonists. Like they're bad guys, but they're so much more powerful than the players will ever be that like
Agreed.
they don't make for good villains, right? Because you can't fuck with them at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
someone, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, is that something you'd hesitate to, like, even involve the elves in like are they always going to be background?
Well, they're not necessarily background, but they're just like they tend to be the people in charge of the badness as opposed to like foot soldiers, you know.
Okay.
Like they do have physical bodies and stuff, but they like I kind of think of them a bit like genies or something. Like they have that sort of power, you know, where they can just like they're just like so powerful magically, and like so perfect physically that I think like heroes don't have a good chance. I guess like Equinox is also similar in that like it's not really a good chance at this stage, certainly, that we could touch him. I did, but you know, it's not a good chance of that happening.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm going with this, man, I'm not actually thinking of an elf to be the villain, though. My thought would be, was to be kind of like, I don't know, some kind of someone who has the ears of the elves, and I don't mean literally. Maybe he does have it, but like there is something about him that is kind of like he's human, but acts as like I don't know, like a go-between between whatever there is of humanity in Iskloft and that of the elves, like someone who claims, and maybe it's not even true, maybe it's a lie, but he claims that he has some kind of affiliation with these beings, these creatures, and that's what gives him kind of like I don't know, like a fearful aura. People are frightened of him because he is the one who walks with the elves, you know, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be rad. Like he made a pact with them or something, or because that's a thing that they do too. Like warlocks make pacts with elves. So he might have, or maybe he like has an artifact of them. So there's like a long running thing. The end of the long campaign that I played with Miko, my character Gunnar made a pact with an elf, and he like forged this crown, and the crown is like cursed basically, but it like gave you like elf-like powers and lost for a long time. But it would be really cool, you know, somebody who like finds maybe it's a warlord already, a jarl or something, who finds a treasure, you know, and the treasure might be Gunnar's sword or like maybe the crown itself or something, an artifact of the elves, and like through it is able to maybe communicate with them and begins to like take on some of their traits or something.
Okay, yeah, I like that, and that's the other thing that I focus on is physically there is something that draws like the attention. There's always something that you can comment on them about them as being completely different from everyone else. It sets them apart. Equinox, for example, it's his eye, like I'm always talking about like how he's scanning you, or like how, you know, that shows his emotion when it flares. It shows when he's angry or triumphant, for example. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be as obvious as that, because like Lawkeepers is yes, very, very heightened. Some kind of physical characteristic about this individual, I think. I don't know. Maybe like go ahead.
So there's a long-running thing in like the naming conventions of Norse people that you would get like what is it? You know, like a name that describes you in some way. So there's like Harold Bluetooth, or you know, Harold Finehair, or like people who have like whatever there's a word for that kind of name. That's a descriptor of yourself.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know, so he could be Red something, or you know, something like Kai has put up an incredible interest post for Iskloft the other day, and he had like two characters. One of them was like something Kinslayer, and the other one was Red Torvald. And like those are both great names. So maybe this villain has something like that. He's got like a title that goes with him, and that's a good way to like bring in that descriptor, you know.
Absolutely. And from that information, you're already telling your players, well, this person is well known enough about this particular thing that he is called this by other people. Like he already has a reputation. Like he has established himself as being either particularly good or particularly defined by something.
So there's two that I love that I've used more than once. There's Blackhand, which I just think is a fucking great name for a person, and Redmaw, I love as well. So I like Blackhand because he might have picked up this artifact. Maybe it's a weapon, and his like hand and arm have begun to like blacken and like necrotize or like wither, you know. But it's still very powerful, but it looks kind of like awful and withered.
I really like that. And are we saying then that this is the kind of character who isn't going to be martially like proficient? Is he a fighter, or is he gonna be more of a?
It would fit better if he wasn't. I think it would make him more annoying.
I agree.
So maybe it's not a weapon then that he found. It's something else.
Maybe branch of a tree.
Yeah, a branch of a tree would be cool. Maybe it's okay. So there's a dragon that like chews on the roots of the world tree. A base of the world tree that all of the worlds are connected to. This is Dragon Nidhogg, who like chews at the roots and tries to destroy the world. What if this guy, in a vision, when he had drank some mushroom tea, he like went to Nidavellir, which is like the world where Nidhogg lives, and he like took one of the discarded roots that like the dragon had chewed and turned it into like a scepter or something.
Yeah, that's perfect. And on touching it, it blackened his hand and made it like horrible. Yeah, yes. I love that man. See already, and that he's got a defining thing. He's got a defining weapon, or at least symbol that he can carry. This withered, bleached branch of wood that he claims he took from this hallowed, amazing tree. Like him, man. I already like him.
What's he good at? He's obviously manipulative. So is that his strength? He's like a planner. He's a strategist. Or is he, if he has this like thing and he's aligned with the elves, is he very like good at controlling people or like tricking them, possibly magically?
Definitely manipulative, I think. Obviously, it's completely down to you whether it be magically, because it's Iskloft and you've got to be really careful with that, I think. I like to believe that he is almost like piety is his shield, and he has followers, you know, people that believe that yes, indeed, he did pluck this branch from the tree itself. And he has like followers, I think. Perhaps he's rich as well. Like money is something that definitely gets you a long way. Like I like the idea of him being rich, maybe.
Floki was just rich. That was his main power. You know, he was just very, very wealthy.
You can see how much an effect Floki had on people because we have checks in the chat saying "fecking Floki." Like,
yeah, he was an incredible villain. I hated him so much because he was just a fucking coward, and my character was like this valorous Radlord, and he never just fought me. And then at the end, he did fight me. It was terrible. But yeah, so rich, manipulative. He's got this withered hand. So he's obviously a Jarl of some kind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. Or at least, yeah.
So he might have been a Jarl, and maybe he, you know, there's a kind of monster called it's like a HYM, I think. It's like this shadow that like grows from a person's problems. So like if you are, you know, greedy or like possessive or like insecure or hateful, like this like shadow being grows and like follows you in your shadow and like begins to corrupt you and like make you hate and stuff like that. So maybe something like that. It's like an elf that like literally lived in the shadow and like turned him from to like dragon sickness greedy until he went down and got that root. Maybe that he was instructed to do that, you know, like, so he could be a pawn of some kind for the elves.
Yeah, and I think maybe he was like a Jarl, but then something happened to him and he basically just sold everything that he has, took all the money, got as many followers as he could, and now has this plight that he's going on. So he's just this dangerous man with lots of followers, has lots of money. If you piss him off, he can just pay people to kill you.
Yeah, I
Which
think
is
he rarely gets involved himself, right? He
definitely, yeah.
he stands back, and I like to think that he's powerful enough, like a powerful Jarl. He has a standing army, and so when the players meet him, it's like a case of like kneeling, and like he's very imperious, which drives Vikings fucking mental, you know. Which works really well.
And I think also because it's Iskloft, he has to have an excuse why he doesn't personally get involved himself. And I think the reason he doesn't is because he doesn't want, he says this to his followers and to maybe his enemies as well, that he doesn't want to risk anything getting in the way of his mission. So, like that's, you know, he doesn't want to get anyone to get in the way of like him achieving his goal, which is true, but also this is what he tells his enemies. Like, no, I'm not going to play by your rules. I have a divine purpose or whatever, and I'm going to achieve it no matter what you do. And so that's sort of like his way out of being, even though, yes, absolutely, he's a coward and won't or isn't strong enough to. Yeah. Am I?
Yes, you are. Yeah, I can hear.
I thought my computer froze. So yeah, did you see what I mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point that you make about villains. They don't have to be. It's going to say the opposite to the players. So, like that thing about Floki is very true. Like he wasn't at all like us, and that made us angry that he was so successful. You know, and it would work with this guy too. That he's not a great warrior. He's not valorous, or you know, he doesn't tell the truth. He's like a liar and a manipulator, and that like is so much worse and more evil to people who like live a life of like military might.
Absolutely. And I think to even augment this further, he could have people on his under his employ that do obey the tenets that of telling the truth and being valorous and heroic in combat and stuff, but they just happen to have picked a side that pays well and them honor in their own way. So you can have his second in command be the martial like master who is like amazing in combat. I mean, Taylor mentioned in a question here, which is something that I think we should, whilst we continue to develop this dude. She says, how many secondary villains, antagonists do you have in a campaign? Are they connected to the big bad? This dude would definitely have secondary villains. He'd have acolytes as well.
Lieutenants, so.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's like a trope that comes up a lot, is like the bad guy himself is the schemer and the ideas man, but he's always got like the Black Knight sort of new talent, you know, somebody who's like Cersei in the mountain, you know, like somebody who's like imposing physically, very powerful, an excellent warrior or whatever, somebody who like protects them and is always by their side, kind of.
Definitely. Yeah, and I just love that, and it's tried and tested, but the reason it is because it's good storytelling, but above all, it makes complete sense. If you've got someone who isn't able to defend themselves, but they have money and a mission, they're obviously going to make sure that they have people around them that can do it for them. So, yeah, but...
Right. Okay, so where... It's got to be the Jarl somewhere. Yeah. Somewhere rich, so maybe Sutterford, which is like the rich area.
Okay.
Or the Alplot, which is another big area. Probably up there. It's a bit further north.
So then, him coming from really far away. Like, he's just this crazy person that's come from miles away that no one's ever really come into contact with before. But all these stories precede him, you know?
Yeah. Like Euron.
Like Euron, absolutely.
Kind of comes out of nowhere with all these like weird secrets and like established himself as a Jarl very quickly.
Yeah, in fact, you've nailed it there with that description. Yeah, I guess he is a lot like that.
So yeah, so he would come and land somewhere and just like take over Jarldom pretty quickly. So we have to come up with a cool name for that. Well, the names are the hardest part, so that can happen later. But I think his his Jarldom is probably well developed under him. It's like I don't think he has a Jotun castle. There's not very many of those, and those are all very heavily guarded. So I don't think he has one of those. But he probably has like one of the best human settlements, you know. So the thing in
Do you
Islam,
think he's a bit of a...
sorry, most of the castles are like castles, as in stone castles, were made by giants.
Oh, okay.
And people don't build castles out of stone. They tend to, like Vikings didn't really build castles. You know, that was a later development.
Sure.
So like wood and stuff like that. So there's like maybe 4 or 5 Viking castles, and they're all like inhabited by either giant castles, either by jarls or by giants. So I think he might have like taken over a small jarldom and just like built it up over the space of like 5 years, to the point where now it's almost a city and it's got like walls and things like that.
Do you think he's a bit of a roamer as well? Do you think he like takes his like retinue and just sweeps across the land doing different, like that's how I imagine him. Like he definitely does have a place to fall back to, but I like the idea of him just sort of walking around like he owns the place, like because he has such superior forces and a big name. He feels like he can just go and stomp across other people's land, and people that have tried to stop him doing that in the past have suffered for it. Like I like the idea of him sort of like walking to another Jarl's hall and like drinking deeply from a goblet and like knowing that no one's going to stand up and try and stop him because he can just burn your whole world down.
Yeah, so he's like petty and cruel.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So I think that like maybe he like took over. So it goes Carl and then Jarl. So like Carl's are like lieutenants for Jarls. Maybe he took over one of those and then like took over the surrounding ones and then took over the Jarldom. So he has like a Jarldom is huge in Isloft. So he probably like has that, and then maybe now he's like starting to set his sights on other Jarldoms, and so he's like begun the process of like getting Carls to like bend the knee to him or like obey him or kill them. I think close to where his home is, but like always kind of spreading and like conquering.
Yeah, in a way, a bit entrepreneurial, kind of like, but obviously with taking things rather than buying things. Yeah, but like, yeah, like he's always got his head on expanding what he already has. I really like this dude. Well, I don't like him. He sounds horrible, but like I like the concept of him so far. So check for traps. Oh, hang on. Have I moved up the thing? Here we go. Alan says, what is your villain's goals and motivations, and how does that conflict with what the PCs want or are trying to do? The story should be the villain wants something and is having difficulty getting it. Yeah, absolutely. He brings up a good point. Like, now, the thing is that although absolutely the villain has motivations, you don't necessarily have to make those motivations known. I like keeping those kinds of things close to my chest for quite some time.
Yeah, I think that like so it is
that this.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
Islov tends to have motivations that are very material. So like players want to get rich and get a Jarldom, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't tend to be the same sort of like save the world feel, you know. So the way that they would come into conflict with this guy is that he is like encroaching on their lands or their Jarl's lands, or you know, they have some other information, like they saw some like Evolva saw in a vision that this dude was no good and that there was like, you know, bad shit going on. There's also a lot of prophecy in Iskloft and like stories told. So maybe it's like, you know, during a religious ritual, something goes horribly wrong, and the omens are bad, and then they like find out that it's pointing towards this guy, and so they have to go deal with him, something like that.
Definitely, like he must definitely like encroach on their way of life. I love that idea, and I like the idea of him. What would he want more than? It's the thing. What do you get a man who has everything? Isn't it? Like if he's already rich and powerful.
Yeah, domination is like not a great motivation, I think, because it's like, well, it depends on the scope of the setting and the campaign.
Yeah.
but it's nice for players to have like a personal reason to dislike a person. Like with us, and Floki was our Jarl. So like when we started, he was the Jarl that we were subservient to. And that's a really good way to do it as well. Like you start working for him and like he's just a utter bastard to you all the time. And you kind of become more powerful slowly, like gaining power, and eventually you have to like deal with him. Is an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you look to Joffrey Baratheon, he's a good villain, but like generally all he wants really is just harm and to hurt people and to generally have his way. And I think in Iscloft, those kinds of motivations are perfect because, like you say, if you're serving under him, then he's just going to keep doing what he's doing. Like his motivation is, his goal is already complete. He has power, he has money, and he's doing what he wants. And the cost of that is hurting other people, and I think that's probably the issue with this guy. I think.
I wonder, like,
unless you'd rather him have another end game.
No, I like that. I wonder, like, does he make his followers do things that they shouldn't? So, like, act in a way that is disrespectful or like dishonorable, because like that's a hard sell for a lot of warriors.
Maybe he's disenfranchised with the whole way of life. Like he was never able to obey the tenets or whatever it is, like the way to live your life. As a Viking, I always forget the name of that. But because he was never good enough to maintain that, like he looks on it with disdain and doesn't like it, and he wants to make it so that his order and his Yaldom, or the people that he controls, sort of start adopting a new way of life, perhaps.
Yeah, so
And
maybe
he's trying to...
maybe he has like a more medieval view of things, like a more feudal view. Where raiding isn't as important or like as big a part of it, and where like the martial side isn't as vital. Could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of him believing, or at least letting other people believe, that he has this other mission. Like he's got this, like he has like a free, a get out of jail free card from the gods because he's carrying that staff, that scepter. And I don't know whether it's just that or if there's something more about that. But
if he's associated with the elves, then he must have something going on, something bad, because their plans are bad.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe he has like an ulterior motive that has to do with them, like that they are telling him he needs to do this thing. They've given him some fell mission, and he's trying to do that. But in the process, if he can get rich and famous, whatever, that's good for him too.
Definitely.
We have a lot of
checks.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say checks. So if prophecy is his tool to stay out of trouble and throw his minions in, does that then mean that it's his greatest weakness? The more players chip at his plan, the more the idea of the prophecy falls away to his followers, if that makes sense.
Okay, so he has this plan that's like really important. That's what he tells his followers. We were talking about that. And they might follow him for it. So if the players start to like erode that and show that the plan isn't as great or as necessary, then maybe they do stop to like be as loyal to him or whatever.
Yeah, I completely see that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I like this dude.
I think his name is going to be Sigurd, because that is a name that means victory. I think he's got a very grand name.
Also, Sigurd was an asshole in the story.
Yeah, I think he's got some sort of a grand name. Or maybe he's like named after a god or something. Something really fucking bratty,
Yeah. I really like that idea. Maybe he has followers, like, this is another thing that I like about the villains, that they have a particular follower that all bear the same thing. So with Equinox, it's the Silver Guard. They're basically his stormtroopers. What if he plucks out the eye of his closest in command, so each of them have like one eye, like Odin or something?
Yeah. Or cuts off a hand like Tyr. Well, that would just make you way less good at fighting. But I do like it as an idea.
Yeah. I know. Obviously, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense.
No, he would,
but
he would then obviously masquerade as a godly man when he's not, you know. So he would pretend to be very religious, and like holy, but actually it's all just like sort of cynical use of other people's religious beliefs. You know, it's like special unit, and they all have, you know, one eye or missing a hand or whatever it is, golden hair or something like that. Then people were like, oh, you know, he must be blessed by the gods. He's got all these like religious followers or whatever, but actually he's just using that because he's aware that other people, the character that I play in Nico's Game of Thrones game, knows that idiots follow honor, and so he like uses that to his advantage all the time to fuck them, you know. He could like realize that like Vikings have a certain kind of honor and a certain kind of like spirituality and stuff, and he would just like use it against them.
I agree, and it buys back into that disdain we were talking about before, the disdain of the culture that he's currently living in, so he's now using it against his enemies and to control people. He knows that they'll bend to like signs from the gods and stuff, so he uses that, you know.
For sure. Okay, let's see what else we have. Ulterior. Mike says, "This is why I'm excited for the Foundation. I'm curious as to how you'll build your empire. Watch the Foundation. It's a campaign that Mike is running, in which we are building an empire slowly but surely. We are going to build it with blood and treachery.
Best way to build it.
Yeah. Taylor says, ulterior motives. Villain Jarl wants to marry someone's daughter or take over land, but his end game involves an artifact or treasure that his seer told him about. There you go. So like the things the players see is that this like creepy bastard wants to like marry their Jarl's daughter, but actually he only wants to get into that land because there's like something there that he needs.
That's really good. I like that a lot. That's really cool.
Czech says he seeks a relic under your land. He may be able to forego social niceties, but a mining operation is too far. So he seeks to take by force, perhaps several Jarldoms. Relics of the Dark Elves. Interesting. So he would obviously have
he's sort of like an overreacher as well. He thinks he can use these dark powers to his own aid when he really, maybe he's like, it's an oversight on his part, and actually like it's gonna fuck him up as it would anyone else, but like he's of the mind of it. Yeah, exactly.
Let us use this weapon of the enemy.
In fact, Kex actually says, but I can use them for good in his mind. Perfect.
Sure. And maybe like
read our mind checks.
Want that the more that the more of their relics that he uses, the more he comes under their control, kind of, you know. So at the start, they're just suggesting things to him, but as he like puts on more of their stuff, he like becomes more of their tool, kind of.
Yeah. Crimson Skies says, "Hey guys, he could just be called Wrath." I think Isklof does have its own very Viking-esque sort of naming convention, but I mean that could be one of his nicknames. People could call him Wrath because of I don't know.
I can just translate it into Icelandic, which is what I do for most of the names.
Oh, there you go.
And see what happens. Actually, I'll do that now.
Okay, so whilst you translate that, then I will read the next one. So
there you go. Put it in the chat.
You what? Sorry.
Reithi, Wrath, in Icelandic. It's not bad. It doesn't sound scary enough, though.
No, it doesn't.
Things Alan that end in an I aren't scary. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's very true. Very true. So Alan says his followers could be like that of a cult. You have initiates that know only so much of the mission. Then you have the next tier all the way to the inner circle.
Yes. So maybe when they get to like that inner circle, that's when they lose the hand or pluck the eye or whatever. You know? But
Ooh,
then you
I like that.
Foot soldiers and whatever else, you know, who don't know as much. So they think that there's some sort of grand plan. But as you get to that very inner circle, maybe that's when they find out about the real plan, and maybe they're in it too, and they start to develop the Black Hands, but that should be his thing specifically.
I love that. I've just had another thought as well, and it's not so much about his character; it's just other things that you can have in his contingent and his followers. I really like the idea that this guy is a bit of a lech as well. So he has these, he has this courtesans that each act like particular goddesses, I think.
Oh, it's so blasphemous! I love it.
Isn't that cool? And then
So terribly blasphemous. What if he has tons of bastard children?
yes, oh my god, and some of them have to be like inbred and shit and horrible. He has to have a freakish eldest son who is like a horrible bastardization of a human.
What you know, in Mad Max Fury Road, what's he called? Has that kid?
Yeah.
Fucking huge monster guy, Boagrius from Troy, something like that.
Oh god, yeah.
Deformed or something.
Well, there you go. Like this is like he. Okay, what's inspiration from then? If like he's sort of like a Mad Maxian villain almost, because like he has that higher calling, like they do in Mad Max. Like they've got mutants, they've got this weird warped sense of how they operate. I love it. A half-elf bastard as a sidekick, says Checks. Maybe he's a half-elf bastard. Maybe, I don't know.
He could have a half-elf bastard son. Like maybe as part of like the ritual in which he like learned stuff from the elves, he had to like make it with one of their terrifying queens.
Yeah.
And he has this like awful monster child.
Oh god, I love it. And he looks on that night as like a test, almost like the night the elves tested him or whatever, and he succeeded.
And maybe it actually went on for hundreds of years, you know, like.
Oh god, yeah.
Have you read what's it called, The Name of the Wind?
I'm currently on the second one.
Okay, then I won't talk any further.
Please don't. I don't want it ruined. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I won't say anything else. But you'll notice it when you read it, and you'll come back to me, and we'll talk about it. Let's see. All his children could be incarnates of himself, each representing a part of him. That could be interesting. So, like, one of them is, or like they all embody different aspects of him to some extent. Like, you know, he's got like crafty ones, and he's got like charming ones, and fucking all that sort of stuff. That could be cool. I like the idea that he has loads of kids, loads of bastard kids. Bastard kids aren't very popular in Iscloft.
And some of them could be, some of them might be okay, like normal, like nice people. Like some people could be, like not all of them are like evil for evil's sake. I think some of them could just be, just because that's their life. They've been with him their entire life.
I even think that most of the people who work for him are just like normal people. They're just like people who have sworn to a successful Jarl, you know? Like, he's rich, he's powerful, like why would you not swear an oath to him? And like most people have no idea of what's going on, and it's really only those where in his inner circle he's not just quite a powerful Jarl, you know.
Agreed.
Where he doesn't appear in public much.
No, I almost get like a Mad King vibe, sort of. People serve him, not literally, but like people, just the idea that people serve him regardless, you know. It's insanity.
Yes. Oh, goodness. Excuse me.
I don't know, man. I think we've done pretty well there.
I think we've done very well, yeah. It was a good idea.
Yeah, he's pretty cool, man. I like him an awful lot.
Cool. Well,
so yeah.
We've had a good chat, I think. More structured and more fucking on point than the previous one. We did a lot of rambling when we were both exhausted.
Definitely, yes.
But this one felt a bit more on point. So thank you to all of you lovely people who watched and threw in ideas and stuff like that. Always very helpful. And yeah, we're going to go now and see you guys soon, I guess. Thank you to Rob.
Take it easy, guys.
On Performance Check. Check out his channel and check out the Lore Keepers. Check out Mike the Piper and Foundation. And if you want to, you can watch some of my games as well. See you later.